Welcome to the Johnny Dell Football Academy podcast on the channel that's trying to answer the whys and hows of the game by talking through and dissecting game film and diving deeper to explain why the X's zig and the O's zag. I am Adam Marino, joined by Mr. Johnny Dell, and we are reminding you, as always, the most fun way to watch is on YouTube, where we go live. There you can comment into the live show. Be sure to hit the notification bell and turn on your notifications so you can be a part of the conversation. We also stream live on Facebook and X. Also, the audio versions are always found on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, if you are live with us in the chat, it's probably because you are subscribed, you've hit the notification bell, and turned those notifications on. So, when sharing with your friends, be sure to let them know. We also love to hear from you outside of our live show. Email us at johnnydellsfootballacademy@gmail.com, and you can always check out the website jfa49.com, as it is the most fun way to support the channel. Also, the way we boost the chat and boost the algorithm is to type out hashtag. Yes, thank you to, again, the usual suspects hanging out with us for Wildcard weekend. We got another game tonight as the Lambs are in Arizona because of the fires. I do have some cousins and family members in LA area. They are not on the rich side of things, so they did not have to evacuate. It seemed like only the crazy rich people are the ones in that area, is what it seems like. It's not like East LA, but yes, thoughts and prayers to that area, everyone who had to evacuate. We got lots to get into. Dre from Dre area should be joining. That is the word on the street. A little birdie told me after his kid goes to school, which is fair. So we got lots to get into, Johnny. I know you watched all the games, correct?
Yeah, I saw all the games. I missed a few plays here and there, with my kiddos and the family. It's a lot of football to watch in a weekend. But yeah, watched it all. Had a friend of mine, Cody, who's a rabid Texans fan. I may even review some Texans film this week. Of course, I will give a give a little 49ers spin to it, seeing as that they are 49ers South. Do we call that Southwest? I mean, it's kind of like just straight south. Like we say, like Miami is 49ers South. I really think Miami needs to be 49ers Southeast, and then Houston is 49ers South with D'Amico Ryans there and Bobby Slowick and everything that they got going on down in Houston. But happy for D'Amico. That was a strong performance by that game. He was a great coach for us. Wish him nothing but success. And we are going to be rooting so hard for him next week, as they are confirmed now to be playing the Kansas City Chiefs next week. So hopefully I'm on an anybody but the Chiefs year. So hopefully the Houston Texans can be the ones to take down and prevent the three-peat this year. So after that, I'll then make a choice. But I'm rooting hard for the Texans this week.
That's very fair. Let's get into the games. Let's do it chronologically and finish up here with the arm of there was lots of memes with the Chargers. Shout out to the Chargers for at least getting there, because they were kind of on a downslope. Harbaugh comes in, we know him well. And Justin Herbert, the memes of like, boy, say what you want, but he throws a pretty pick. Like, it's a pretty ball. Like, the guy just doubled his interception intake in 60 minutes of football.
Yeah, I mean, look, just Justin Herbert, I have no reason to not like Justin Herbert. I think obviously a very talented quarterback. There's no denying that. And he hasn't been somebody who's caused the 49ers immense pain. So I'm not sitting here, like I do usually with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and thinking, gosh, I really don't want to see them win. So there's nothing there. Good memories from the Harbaugh years. So I don't have any ill will towards Harbaugh. It's just there's been this weird. I mean, and maybe it's just the nature of what it is. I think we've heard from a certain segment of the 49ers fandom or orbit that says, imagine what Kyle Shanahan could do with Justin Herbert, or Justin Herbert gets paid. And we say, Brock Purdy's going to get paid similar to what Justin Herbert is. And it's this immediate, Brock Purdy isn't worth anything close to what Justin Herbert is. So if you pay Brock Purdy even the same amount as Justin Herbert, you're making a huge mistake. And there's even been the talk of, should the 49ers have brought Harbaugh back and fired Kyle Shanahan after last year or something? And so it does kind of put you into defensive mode on that, and say, and then it's hard not to use that game as the counterpoint and say, okay, what we saw with the Chargers was the same problems that we did see during the Harbaugh era with the 49ers. Harbaugh was a great coach, but I think we romanticize the offensive ability during that time. From 2011 to 2014, none of those offenses were, save for about a 7 to 8 week period with Kaepernick coming in and adding this read option element that the league had not seen before. Outside of that, this was never a high, consistently productive offense. You look at Kyle Shanahan's offenses compared to that, and it's not even close. It's not even close. We've often said, imagine if you put that defense with Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan would have 4 Super Bowls right now. That we saw the same sort of issues, a very good defense and an offense that just doesn't seem like, come playoffs, they have what it takes to really perform at a high level. We saw this. This is kind of a Greg Roman thing. We saw this with the Ravens when Greg Roman was with the Ravens. We saw it with the Bills when Greg Roman was with the Bills. We saw it with the 49ers when Greg Roman was with the 49ers. And now we saw that same thing here with the Chargers and there. And then you see the picks, and they weren't good. You look at this and you say, okay, take draft slot, take measurables, which go into draft slot, off the table, and you just compare straight numbers of quarterback performance, numbers, and what their teams have accomplished. And Brock Purdy's resume is so much better than other guys who are getting paid really, really, really well right now. So there is no argument point, no negotiation point that the 49ers can approach Brock Purdy and say, you should take $45 million a year. There is no basis for that based on anything of what any agent or even what teams base their contract extensions on. So when I think about these games, and coming off of that, especially that Chargers Texans game, you go, the Texans defense looks really strong. And, a lot of the machinations people have been saying for the last 6 weeks proved to kind of be great romanticizing of some other situations.
Yeah, I think there's so much to be said about what we think we know and then what really goes on behind closed doors. And
As everybody's giving Adam a hard time for his Wi-Fi
my
connection right now.
Timu internet, yeah, I don't know. Usually it's good as long as they can hear my tantalizing voice. That's all I care about, because no one's here to look at me. But I do know I have a soothing voice. So
Okay.
that this podcast turned.
No,
No,
got really, really awkward real quick.
So let's keep it moving with the next game on the docket was not the Broncos and Bills. What was before? Oh, such an forgotten game was Pittsburgh
Steelers and Ravens.
They limped so heavily into the playoffs that when Derrick Henry has that smile on his face that went viral, running 44 yards down the field, like not one person, not even anyone in Pittsburgh, is shocked about that. So it's just like that game was kind of just blah for me. You never had a sense, not one time, that Pittsburgh was a, gonna win, or B, make it all that interesting, to be honest. It's more of a controversy now with Justin Fields and Russell Wilson if you're in Pittsburgh. And does Tomlin keep his job even though,
Oh,
Pittsburgh fans are tired,
Tomlin's keeping his job. The
but they're
Steelers have
tired
already
of
released a
hearing
statement.
they're tired of hearing, "Well, he's never had a losing record." In Pittsburgh, I don't know why there's a lot of Steeler fans in Indiana, there just is, and that's they keep saying, "We're done hearing about that he's never had a losing record. We're done with that. He hasn't won a playoff game in almost 10 years, so that's enough." So, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they've also had an issue there in Pittsburgh for a long time that has plagued a lot of different teams and well, just plagued a lot of different teams. And why you pay Brock Purdy is that they have not been able to satisfy or find a solution for their quarterback situation since Ben Roethlisberger retired. That's just the fact of the matter is that they have not been able to really satisfy that part of the equation. They've always had a strong defense, but they just have not been able to put together a consistent and productive offense, and really have not been able to answer who's going to be our quarterback of the future. And again, it's another example of you can have a great coach, somebody who has built a strong culture, who finds a way to win in never had a losing season, but if you don't have a guy that can win you a lot of
Now
games,
here's a guy.
you well, it's just the facts. If you don't have a dude who can win a lot of games and play quarterback at a high level, um, then you do not have a chance in the playoffs. You don't have a chance to win a lot of games, and that's probably why Mike Tomlin is still there. Is because they're saying, okay, we need to get some stability at the quarterback position and get some high level play from the quarterback position, and then make a determination off of that. And again, I think what we've seen from these playoffs overall is it reminds you of how good Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan have been together in the playoffs. The only two losses he's had, one was when he didn't finish the game because of a torn UCL. Brock is 4-2 in the playoffs, and the only other loss outside of overtime in the Super Bowl was a UCL tear. And when you consider his performance in the playoffs, that and what the team has been able to do, it is miles ahead of most of the teams in there. And so Zach coming in with the huge super chat. What
And that
kills
was just
me
for Zach because he asked me about it.
is you have folks saying Purdy doesn't even deserve market value. Yeah. Mr. Sims is one of those. You've got one dude who should know better saying Purdy shouldn't even make half the market value. The playoffs should show you how dumb this is. And exactly
That's
right.
crazy.
It
That's
is
crazy.
exactly right, because these playoffs expose what teams can play at a high level and what quarterbacks can play at a high level. Um, I don't care as much about a bad game here or there. I care about what has been their overall uh, track record throughout the playoffs. And the track record is that when Brock Purdy has an intact elbow, he can play at the highest levels and keep up with the greatest of teams in the playoffs. Um, there was no blowouts outside of that when he had an intact UCL. In fact, the 49ers have really had some strong showings. I remember them blowing out the Seattle Seahawks, who in the playoffs, in his first playoff game. You remember a tight game against the Cowboys, who were a very good team that year. That was probably Dallas's best chance. And then last year, the two come from behind wins to get you to the Super Bowl. And so when you look at this and people are saying he deserves half a market value, well, then what market value does Jordan Love get here? Because Jordan Love played horrible yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, it was bad. Um, what market value does Justin Herbert deserve? Because he played horrible last year. What market value does Russell Wilson get, who's won a Super Bowl? Because he played rather poorly. I didn't even finish that game because that game, it was, you got to halftime and you were like, okay, this game is done. Like it is it's way out of there. And my wife's the term blowouts is giving my wife um flashbacks to my
PTSD.
first child. My first daughter, oh my gosh, she was our first child. That child was the queen of blowouts. Like we had to bring extra towels and like 4 changes of clothes whenever we went anywhere, because there'd be the first blowout and it would go through, the first layer in the car seat, and then you take that out, and then she'd have another blowout and it'd take out the second layer in the car seat, and then you're putting towels down. Like it was wild. So anyways, and I think tomorrow night you're going to see, it'll be interesting to see, how Matt Stafford and Sam Darnold do in these playoffs, because Sam Darnold is going to get a big contract this offseason. People are saying nobody's going to pay Brock Purdy. Well, watch somebody pay Sam Darnold a big bag of cash. Think about what Kirk Cousins was paid every year, when that dude has never gone far in the playoffs at all. It was a kind of a thing about primetime Kirk, right? So people say that nobody will pay him market value. Excuse me. Yes, there's a lot of teams that are actually going to pay him would pay him market value at 60 mil a year, because that's what quarterbacks get paid. Brock Osweiler, after playing like 4 games, got paid as the highest paid quarterback in the league. So somebody will pay him. Like somebody will pay you. If you don't think the Steelers would turn around and offer Brock Purdy a big time contract to try and come in there and provide some stability with their run game and their defense, then I don't know what you're on. The only team that maybe wouldn't is the Browns, because they can't, because they're saddled with $73 million in a cap hit with Deshaun Watson, who just tore his Achilles again. I guess he was trying to run away from allegations too fast and tore his Achilles. But
yeah, I don't know if that's real. I think that's like Michael Jordan being forced to retire because of the gambling thing. Like, it seems shoddy with the Deshaun Watson. Like, hey, you got to go away, so we'll just say you're injured.
yeah, no, I think it really was, and it's laughable. So we'll finish up this thought and bring Dre, and he's in here. But when it comes to Brock Purdy's contract, people are saying 4 years, 5 years. I think it's going to be a 6-year 360. That's what I think. I think it's going to be 6 years 360 with 120 guaranteed. That's what I think. And I think probably 100 fully guaranteed at signing, maybe even upwards to a 150, probably closer to 150. Really thinking about 150 guaranteed, 100 fully guaranteed. I think that's a contract that makes sense, because the 6 years allows you to spread it out over more years. But we will bring Dre in and get his and slap him with this right after he's gotten probably his first sip of coffee on the day.
Seriously, right?
We're talking Brock Purdy's contract.
Batman Cup.
What do you think? Years, terms. We'll get into this. We'll be talking about this a lot over the next few weeks, and I'm actually putting together a film review on why Brock deserves market value. But what do you think? What did these playoffs tell you about Brock Purdy's market value? Dre looks so enamored with my question that he's literally in shock and frozen. So I guess everybody's got the Temu internet today.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
So maybe popping him out. Nope, he's not responding at all. He looks. I mean, that's a good still frame though. It's not like one of those weird like eyes blinking regular moment. Like that could be a good headshot. Oh, he's got a power outage. Man.
Oh, lovely.
Man. All right. So
well, let's keep going with the other games, and let's get back into all things Niners then. So Saquon Barkley is the next game. The fighting Barkleys is
I mean, really, if there was ever an argument, like when I look at this and I say, okay, if there's ever going to be a year that somebody outside of quarterback deserves MVP, this would be that year. Like Saquon is a huge reason that Eagles team is a strong contender again.
Yeah.
Chris, but I also look at that after the year that Chris McCaffrey had, last year and him not getting it. It's I don't know if we'll ever see a non-quarterback get it, because Lamar Jackson is almost surely going to get it, and it's the same argument that people have as a pejorative against Brock Purdy. Well, when you have a Christian McCaffrey in the offensive player of the year, it's a lot easier to play quarterback. Well, as we saw from that Steelers game, it's a lot easier to play quarterback when you have a battering ram named Derrick Henry that is bashing through the opposing defense that they have to, commit so many resources to trying to stop. There's no coincidence that Lamar Jackson's best year is coming with the best running back he's been paired with. And it's not even close. Like, obviously, when you put better players around a quarterback, they are going to be better. I don't know why this is only ever a pejorative for Brock Purdy. Oh, he's got weapons. Show me a quarterback who's done really well without any weapons. I mean, Mike Evans looked nearly unguardable last night, and still didn't get that. People saying Josh Allen's going to win the MVP. I don't think so, because the same people who vote for MVP are the same people who vote for All Pro, and they voted for Lamar Jackson ahead of Josh Allen. So I don't see how they're going. How the same people who put Josh or Lamar Jackson as first team All Pro and Josh Allen as second team All Pro are going to then put Josh Allen as MVP. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be Lamar Jackson, and that's not even close, because again, the votes for MVP were cast before yesterday or before this weekend's games. So
it's
Lamar
the
Jackson. Performance in the playoffs won't
4 interceptions or 5 interceptions, and 3 of them were either tipped or like whatever, like not his fault at all. So you're saying that much playing time to really have 2 interceptions. Hey, he's got power.
Dude, everything just shut off on me. I was like, oh my God. It's never happened before out here in my studio. So I was like, oh my God. I think it's because
I'll turn the question back real quick.
Okay.
So what has this weekend of playoffs told you about Brock Purdy's market value? I think that's been really fascinating to me, and because that's been a very big argument on social media this weekend.
It really has. I mean, when you look at the performances from, like, let's say a Justin Herbert or I don't know, Jordan Love. I mean, they both played
Russell Wilson.
Well, wasn't Russell Wilson? He's Russell Wilson. It is what it is. But with the other 2 guys, it's just, those are the guys that are in his same market.
Sure,
especially Jordan Love.
Guys. Yeah.
And they both performed really terribly. Now, granted, Jordan Love was going against probably the best defense in the NFC, if not in the league. So they're a really good team, the Eagles. But he never looked comfortable. He never got into a rhythm. He was throwing wildly deep passes. So it goes to show you that even if you have that rocket arm, you're still, if you're not accurate and you're not, throwing to a wide open receiver, it doesn't mean much. You're either going to get intercepted or you're hoping for pass interference. So when you look at their performance, right, and you compare that to Purdy and his market value, I think his market value just went up because he's played in the playoffs and he's never had a game like that. He's never had a game so far where he's thrown multiple interceptions, where he's looked like he's not in command. And even when he did look that way against the Packers last year, in the second half, he played better in the fourth quarter. He led his team down the field to essentially win the game. So when it comes to his contract, I don't see.
And Jordan Love also threw a game-sealing interception in that game
across his body.
Right.
Where it was like, that's what you don't. That's the cardinal rule. Like you don't throw it across your body, especially when
farved it.
Yeah, well, and especially when I want to say it was like second down. And they still had timeouts. All you had to do was throw it away.
Yeah.
Or just slide. Anything.
And that was a play that, Drake came up with the interception, but if he didn't, Fred Warner was going to get it.
Yeah.
I mean, that was not open. Like, Dre made an incredible play to take an interception away from Fred Warner. That was what his incredible play was. It wasn't just an incredible play to seal the game. It was just an incredible play to take an interception away from Fred Warner.
So I think when you compound all of that, right, and in the past, I've even said too, like when you compare him to like the Josh Allens and Lamar Jacksons, if you're paying him that much money, he does have a ceiling compared to them because he can only, there's some things that he can't do. But when we're talking about pure market value, yeah, I think that if he's going to get a contract, which he is, I agree with Johnny. It's going to be somewhere in the realm of 5 to 6 years. There's no way that they're going to sign him to a 4-year deal and then do this again in 3 years. Because after 3 years, when you get on that last year of your contract, that's when all the, extension talk and all that
really,
drama starts up.
If you sign him for 4 years, you'd have to redo it in 2. That's what would have to happen because you would backload that cap. And so, CJ, this is the argument that I've been having out there, and some people messaged me, and and I've said the same thing. I think I said the same thing with you, Dre. Is that I think there's this viewpoint that when you look at quarterbacks like Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, Brock Purdy, and maybe even what Jaden Daniels now we're going to look at, or whoever's out there.
Right. I mean, all those guys.
That there's this idea that they're all performing at the same at playing the quarterback position, the same ability to process the field, throw accurately, read the defense, and operate an offense. So it's like that's net zero. That's just your starting point with these guys. That's how we view them. And then we say, well, Brock has the weakest physicals of all of those guys, and that is why you can't pay them the same. But that's not what's actually going on here, because if that were the case, then you would not have the success that Brock Purdy has had in this league. That I wouldn't see the things that I've seen on film of the high anticipation throwing. A lot of times what you get with big arm guys is they will throw the ball when a guy breaks open. And so this is also why we've seen that Brock Purdy's pass blocking offensive line has been ranked in the bottom third, but they have been a hugely productive passing offense from the standpoint of yards per attempt. They've been the highest in the league, right? And that points to a quarterback getting the ball out on time. So he doesn't have to see the guys open first. He's able to see it, throw it to a spot, they get there, and it's successful. Now, when that gets disrupted, there are some issues there, but a big arm guy will usually sit back and wait until that guy uncovers, because they're going to fire that ball in there like a Justin Herbert, like a Josh Allen will have a lot of times. And so their line has to hold up for another 0.1, 0.2 seconds. So, and there's pros and cons in that, but this doesn't just mean that it's a net zero and that there's things that Brock Purdy can't do that are better than those guys. Brock Purdy has played the position of quarterback at the highest levels in our league.
Yeah.
So when you say, well, he has these physical limitations, you say, well, then that's even more, that should speak to how strong the mental side of the game is for him, that he can play at the highest levels with those physical limitations. If it was a net zero of the mental side working the same between these guys, then he shouldn't even be in the same conversation. As far as we should be sitting here saying, why did the 49ers only have 3,000 passing yards this year? That's what it should be. Yeah. It shouldn't be, how did Brock get over 3,800 yards in 15 games? He's 7th in the league in passing yards. How were there 25 other guys in the league, starting quarterbacks in the league, that had less passing yards than Brock Purdy, and Brock didn't even play a full season? Like, those are the conversations that we should have. When you look at yards per game, he's 3rd in the NFL. I mean, so when you say, okay, he doesn't have the physical attributes, okay, but that you're assuming then that he doesn't have any attributes that are superior to those other guys. And that's just not true. That isn't true. There's no metric that you can point to that would prove that that's true. So that's where I have an issue with that. And I say, because I don't care about the physicals. Steve Young did not have a big arm. He had a very, very accurate arm.
Yeah,
and
it was not big.
He had an incredible mind. But it also took Steve until he was 30 to start for the 49ers. Brock Purdy's 25. Okay.
Yeah.
So when we think about Steve Young in his prime, Brock is still like 6 and 7 years away from that. So from that age. So like I don't care about the big, like, I know people love the big arm. It's so cool to see that ball fly through the air, that big, beautiful, deep pass, you know, but I really don't care as much. I care more about, do they play the position really well? And you saw in the Houston and Chargers game that when your quarterback throws 4 interceptions, it is really hard to win a game. When you're the Packers and your quarterback cannot have a sustaining offense, it's really hard to win a playoff game. You have Josh Jacobs as your running back. You should be able, like, you can't sit here and say the 49ers had a better running game than the Packers. I don't know. The Packers had a pretty darn good running game this year. So like, I just don't see that argument there.
And not only that, but when you look at Jordan Love, right? So let's use Jordan Love as a barometer for Brock Purdy. Okay. So when you look at like his team's total defense, right? Last season in 2023, his total defense was the Packers had the 17th ranked defense. They were tied for 17th with the Titans. Okay. This year, the Packers had the number 5 defense in the league. This is courtesy of Fox Sports. Now you go over to the total offense because he's a quarterback, right? You look at the 2023 total offense. They were ranked 11th going against the Niners, right? They had the 11th ranked offense in the league last year. This season, going into the playoffs, they had the number 5 ranked offense in the league, and they played poorly. They played even worse this season compared to last season, right? And you can argue, well, Jordan Love was hurt a lot this year. Well, I mean, Brock Purdy was hurt a lot this year as well. And the Niners had the number 4 ranked offense in the league this season. So even with the limitations, even with the players that weren't there, Brandon Ayuk, he started the season, but that wasn't the same Brandon Ayuk. And then now he's out until midseason probably. Deebo Samuel dealing with a number of injuries because when he doesn't have pneumonia, but when he doesn't have Brandon Ayuk there, then he gets all the punishment. He gets all the big hits. He gets everything because they're trying to force feed him the ball because they're like, well, he's our playmaker. Well, the only guy that succeeded was George Kittle. George Kittle had an amazing year. Though he got beaten out by Brock Bowers. My point is this, though,
and George Kittle had three injuries this year too.
Yeah,
he had a hamstring injury. He had the ribs. He had the hamstring. He had there was one other one.
It was pneumonia. I mean,
toe or something. Or foot. He had a foot sprain.
Yes, he did.
And Juwan Jennings had a really great year, almost 1,000 yards. Juwan Jennings also runs a 4.7. So nobody was sitting there. Nobody was sitting there saying, okay, we really got to back up because of Juwan Jennings. People say, well, Purdy's arm. I've seen Purdy launch the ball 45 yards. Like, that's enough to back up any defensive backs. But when they sit there with an 8-yard cushion and don't move for the first 4 steps of a receiver, that makes it harder to stretch the field. You have less space.
Right.
And Juwan Jennings, I love him, but he wasn't the guy that I'm looking at running that deep crosser against man coverage. It just wasn't going to be there. Brandon Ayuk, how many times last year on 3rd down did we go to Brandon Ayuk on 3rd and 8?
Absolutely.
There was so many drives that would be continued by Brandon Ayuk. And it's just, we want Ricky Pearsall to be that. I think he will. But Ricky, obviously, he had his struggles this year. I mean, not all on his own. They're going to have time to be able to get everybody back together and really start working on things. Yeah. And Brandon, like you said, Brandon probably not going to be around until halfway through the year next year. I think it's going to be a slow start to get him back. Brock Purdy and Ricky Pearsall need to form a connection over the next 6 months. Like that, the next 6 months has to be all about those guys being on the exact same page. You see that, and this offense will be right back. Brock Purdy's going to throw for 4,500 yards next year.
Yeah,
and supposedly they are, right? They've talked about they're getting together. So that's been documented. Hopefully that is the case. I feel like it would be with those guys. You just see the fire that they have. But there's more. We're at the part of the season, Dre, where there's more questions than answers, and that's why we have a show. That's why you have a show. Yeah. Which, real quick, Dre, let us know where we can follow you.
You can follow me on YouTube over at Dre Area Sports, and also on X at Dre Area Sports, and on Instagram as well.
So this is a great point I want to get here with Chad. He says we saw plays this year where guys were open for TDs and his arm prevented those plays from being TDs. You saw the same thing from the big arm QBs yesterday, but you didn't care. You don't remember them because it wasn't your team. Yeah. We saw guys miss wide open players down that were 3 and 4 yards behind the defense. Justin Herbert did it. Jordan Love did it. Jalen Hurts did it. All these guys missed plays because they didn't get the ball in and exactly where they wanted it to be down the field. You don't remember those because it wasn't your team. You are hyper-focusing on Brock Purdy.
But it's also a case too, Johnny, it's also a case where they go, he missed him. But he could have hit him. He could have made that pass.
And then we put it on X all week. We put it on X all week of Brock missing it, right? Or Brock.
But if Brock misses that pass, then they go, he missed that. He underthrew that. He probably couldn't hit that pass anyway.
Right.
While the other player, he could have hit it. Maybe somebody hit his arm.
I remember Justin Herbert overthrowing his receiver by 8 yards.
I remember Jimmy Garoppolo doing that too in the Super Bowl.
Right,
remember that?
Right. We remember Jimmy. Now, okay, that's a different conversation.
Damn it!
We see every quarterback miss these throws. Like it's about hit rate, and when you look at Brock Purdy's hit rate on deep throws, it's better than any quarterback in the league. So this argument that his arm is preventing those plays from happening, that is simply a hyper focusing on only our team and remembering only what our guy does. And we don't watch the other teams through the same lens. So people will say I'm biased. And I say, no, that is the biased take. When you look at it and say Brock Purdy, another example. Okay. The deep pass against the Lions to Ricky Pearsall down the right sideline. That play got criticized so much because it was, if he threw it another yard and a half further, that's a touchdown to Ricky Pearsall. And I go, okay, we also watched 5 quarterbacks not even complete that pass that everybody says has more arm talent than Brock Purdy that missed that same throw. I watched the guy throw an interception throwing that same exact pass yesterday. Mm-hmm. So I don't like that is when we're focusing more on Brock Purdy than what actually is going on. That's the issue I have, is that it's only looking at the highlight reels of everybody else, and is not, because we don't feel the pain of the misses. We feel the wows of the hits, but we don't feel the pain of the misses. And with our own guys, we tend to feel the pain of the misses, and we feel only relief that we didn't miss when it's completed. Right.
That's a good one-liner.
I think a good comparison is if you watch the film Top Gun Maverick. You know, what do they say before they go into that last dogfight? It's not the plane, it's the pilot. So you might have a badass jet that's got all kinds of capabilities and all that, but if the pilot isn't elite,
it's about the man in the box.
It's what it is. And so, yes, I think that mentally, his processing ability, his decision making, his ability to play the quarterback position is at such a high level compared to a lot of other quarterbacks in the league. Now, I think this year was more of a struggle because, I mean, look, he had guys coming in and out of the lineup. He had games where he had receivers that he hadn't even probably thrown those routes to. And so,
there was so many. I saw so many things on film of just like him and his receivers were not on the same page.
Well, and you even said too on my show, you were like, yeah, they only have 2 hours every week to work in their plays. So, and I think that's something that people need to understand, because if you have 2 hours every week to actually physically work in those plays and your players are not there, how much of a detriment is it to the team when a guy is hurt? He can study the plays and be there when they're talking about it, but he can't perform them in that 2 hour gap.
There's no muscle memory.
There's no muscle memory. So now you're asking a player as good as he is, whoever it is, to perform these plays without actually physically running the plays. I mean, that's really hard to do. And we saw Brandon Ayuk try and do that from week 1. You can tell like he doesn't look the same. Granted, he cut his hair, which I was like, that's kind of weird. And then he wasn't running the routes right, and then he's dropping passes. Brock Purdy threw him an absolute dime in the end zone where he dove out to catch it, and both Eli Manning and Peyton Manning both screamed out, "Oh, what a throw!" And then Ayuk dropped it. It was like, oh.
Yeah. And I mean, it also kind of goes back to what we had talked about during the offseason when, Brandon Ayuk was sharing Washington Commanders practice footage.
That was weird.
How often was he? Because, the Commanders and 49ers run a very different offense. Cliff Kingsbury's offense is not a West Coast offense. It's not a wide zone based offense. It's a very different offensive system. So then my mind also says, how much time did Brandon Ayuk stay engaged with our offensive system and our ways of doing things and training what we were doing versus, those kind of drifting eyes towards Washington and started looking what they were doing. And does that interrupt his focus and why he wasn't on every last detail coming in to this season? But it's been an really interesting wild card weekend. I want to get to another different topic with you here, Dre, because I gotta be out of here in 20 minutes. I got an appointment in another town over, but the 49ers, they didn't fire Nick Sorensen. That's the fascinating thing. They didn't fire Nick Sorensen. They just let him know he would not be their defensive coordinator next year. They want to retain him in some way, but the early buzz is right now that if Robert Saleh does not get a head coaching gig, which I don't see him as being a front runner for either the Raiders job or the Jaguars job, that the thought is that he's the leading candidate to return to San Francisco. A lot of people have been calling this season for and into this process for the 49ers to ditch their defensive scheme that they've been running during Kyle Shanahan's entire tenure here. Very attacking, 1-gap, 4-3, cover 3 based defense. Robert Saleh would not represent a departure from that defensive scheme. How do you feel about that?
I think it's fine. I think it's a matter of how you implement that scheme and how you adjust during the actual game. I feel like, I mean, look, I'm not a defensive expert, but to me, it felt like Nick Sorensen just sort of stuck to that scheme, and it was just kind of like, yeah, this is what we do. While Robert Saleh would make adjustments to it throughout the game. Same with D'Amico Ryans. I think you were saying a while back that D'Amico Ryans played a lot of cover 3. Is that right?
Well, he plays a ton of zone. I mean,
ton
a lot
of zone.
Zone.
That's what it is. Yeah, there's a lot of zone. But I feel like with a guy like Robert Saleh, who was just recently a head coach on a team that had the number 3 ranked defense last season, and even this season had very high rankings before he left. I think that he changes the culture. He brings back that sense of urgency, that enthusiasm, that energy, and that's what they've been lacking. And you saw the difference even when Steve Wilkes was here. How they were like, "Hey, maybe you should be down on the sideline, Steve," because. And I think a part of that is, and this may sound stupid, but I think a part of that is that they said, "Hey, look, the players are used to having their guy down there with them, like in the trenches, like slapping them high fives and giving and talking to them directly. Maybe you got to be down here." And he's probably like, "I don't think so, but okay, fine, I'll do it." And then you had Nick Sorensen, who was down in the sidelines, and I mean, every time they showed him, he was just staying there by himself. He just didn't have any energy, didn't have that enthusiasm, didn't have that passion that both D'Amico Ryans and Robert Saleh demonstrated every single game. And I think that's something that they want back. They want a vocal leader. Because look, we all know Kyle Shanahan is not the most vocal leader out there, right? He has coaches that make up for that. And I think that when you have Sorensen, who doesn't say anything, he's quiet as hell. He's dressed just like Johnny with a sweatshirt and a hat on and sunglasses, like.
And the mullet. And
then you got Kyle Shanahan, who's on the sidelines, always looking like he's already pissed off because he's like, "Oh, this is so frustrating." I think that,
to be fair, Bill Walsh always had that same look.
Like, I know, but at the same time, he's a head coach, so like, hey, he's got a lot on his mind. Yeah, but like, I think that also is something that they're looking for. Like, hey, we need somebody to pump energy into this team. Every time they got an interception, every time they made a big play, they would always show D'Amico Ryans or Robert Saleh screaming on the sidelines, "Yeah!"
Zane gonna pop out.
Let's go! And then they come over, you slap them high fives, "Yeah, let's fucking go!" So I think that's another aspect that they're like, dude, we need that back, because Steve Wilkes, they do something good, he just stand, he'd be, all right, yeah, it was just kind of like, okay, cool. I hope he's happy. I don't know. And I swore I heard someone say that they were telling Steve Wilkes, like, hey, Fred Warner and the players, they like to have the coach, like in their face telling them, like, hey, make sure you're doing this and that. Hey, watch out for this, giving them advice on the field, not in a headset where they're like, huh, what? Like, what am I doing? And so when you change up the way that you receive information and the way that you're coached and receive direction, that has an effect. I think it does.
Yeah. I think, again, going back to what these playoffs have shown us, one is that when you have guys who are masters and experts of that defensive system, it makes a big difference when they're running it versus somebody who's trying to run somebody else's system, even if they are extremely knowledgeable and understand a lot about football. So a great example would be the Eagles. Okay. So the Eagles were running a very Fangio-like defense. It was very Fangio / Arondo with Jonathan Gannon. Okay, very quarters based. A lot of Fangio concepts in Jonathan Gannon's system, especially when he was in the Eagles. And there's been he's moved a little bit more towards the Arondo from Oklahoma vein since he's been in Arizona, but they brought in Sean Desai last year to run the Fangio system that they had. Now, they had Fangio as a consultant, if we remember that, okay? So Fangio was there as a consultant, but Sean Desai was the defensive coordinator. And that Eagles defense last year looked terrible. Awful. They had so many issues. Just remember what San Francisco did to that defense at the end of November.
Carved him up.
42 points.
That was the beginning of the end for the Eagles.
And remember then that the Eagles didn't strip Sean Desai of his defensive coordinator title. They stripped him of defensive play calling duties and gave that to Matt Patricia. So Matt Patricia was trying to call plays for a defensive system that was very different than what he had ran as in the Bill Belichick system. Very different. Okay. So what did the Eagles do this last offseason? They fire Sean Desai and they hire Vic Fangio. They make a couple personnel tweaks, and that defense, as you guys have said, might be the best defense in the NFC, maybe even the NFL. That was a defense that was like 30th ranked in the NFL going down the stretch last year with Sean Desai running it. Same exact system. But now you bring in an expert at that system who has ran that system and installed it and done it for so many years and everything. And now it looks wildly different.
You want to know how wildly different? Last season, they were ranked the 26th ranked defense in the league, the Eagles. This year, according to Fox Sports, number 1. That's a huge difference.
That is a huge difference.
They're bringing that's a massive difference. They brought in a guy who's an established defensive coordinator who knows what he's doing. He knows what processes to put in place. He knows how to handle a team. It's like, when you bring in a guy in any job that's heavily experienced at what he or she is doing, they're going to nail the job so much easier. While someone who doesn't know what they're doing is going to have a lot of problems.
Yes. And so then parlaying this back to Robert Saleh, when we looked at Zach is loving you on the show, Dre. We need to have more Dre on this offseason. The offseason schedule will be a little bit more flexible. Yeah. And so we're going to be able to work with Dre and get that going. We're not going to be as time pressed for all the film reviews. So we will definitely be able to get Dre in more during the offseason. And tying this into Lisa's super chat as well. She comes in saying Texas defense should solidify why we don't walk away from the wide 9 just to get defensive tackles who eat up those doubles and let Floyd and Bosa eat in 2 seconds. Exactly. I think what we saw with DeMeco Ryans, they're running the same system. Did we forget that DeMeco Ryans was running Saleh's system when he took over? Mm-hmm. And he didn't go to Houston and start running a different system. He's running the same thing in Houston that the 49ers were running with DeMeco Ryans, that were running with Robert Saleh. That Houston defense looks like it might be the best defense in the AFC because I think they have the weakest offense out of the teams that are left. And so when you look at the offenses that are left, I go, maybe the Chiefs. I think that is going to be a big time defensive battle next week. If you love defensive football, watch that game against the Texans and the Chiefs next week. That is going to be a phenomenal defensive battle.
Somebody's got to beat them. Somebody has to beat the Chiefs.
Somebody has to beat them. But it shows that who is running the system and getting the right personnel in. And people are just like, well, we don't have that personnel. We need to change. I go, it's a lot easier to change and address the defensive tackle position than it is to try and scrap your entire defensive system and have Fred Warner learn a new system after 8 years in the league.
Yeah.
Like, or have somebody like Malik Mustafa learn a new system going into his second year instead of being able to continue to master the one that he's already shown he's really good at, or Renardo Green, or Nick Bosa. People saying we should go to a 3-4. I'm like, why? Because that makes no sense to make Nick Bosa as an outside linebacker. If you're just going to have him rush every time as an outside linebacker, then you might as well play a 4-3 under, which is what we started as under Robert Saleh, and would probably see sometimes it comes back because he did that in New York. So I don't see this massive need to shift away from what we are. We need to add some pieces. Yes. We need to get somebody who runs this system extremely well. Robert Saleh is that guy. Now, my only concern, I guess, I thought after what happened in New York that Robert Saleh was going to get no head coaching interest. I really just thought like that most likely people are going to look at that situation, how that played out over the last few years and say, nah. I think what has happened is the complete debacle that Woody Johnson has made of that situation since firing Robert Saleh is actually why Robert Saleh is getting more head coaching looks now. Like,
well, he got him out early. If he would have stuck with him and they still had the same result, totally different story.
Right.
Who knows what would have happened during the season? But the fact that he fired him so early and then they continue to tank even after they got Devontae Adams, then you go, okay.
And they got Jamal Adams. Right.
But
they traded for Jamal Adams too.
Right. And at that point you're like, okay, so maybe it wasn't really all Saleh because they got worse after he left. So how much can you really pin on him?
And people again also look at how royally screwed up Woody Johnson did with this whole process. And so I think that has really illuminated more than anything that nobody was going to have success in New York with how that was being run. And so, that's like where I go, okay, I would be concerned that he's going to leave again. I think they would probably try. I'm assuming that whenever that New York situation is figured out, they're going to release Jeff Ulbrich from his contract because they still can't technically interview Jeff Ulbrich. Jeff Ulbrich is still under contract with the Jets. And I think what I think the Jets want to do is I think what Woody Johnson wants to do is bring in an offensive head coach and try and have them keep Jeff Ulbrich as defensive coordinator. That's what I think they're trying to do. Otherwise, I think you would have all the assistants released from their contracts now so that whenever the head coach comes in, that he can put together his own staff.
Yeah.
So that is what I think. But I think number one and number two on their list is Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich, but Jeff Ulbrich cannot be interviewed right now. I think that's why we're not really hearing about too many other people. And Brandon Staley is considered a strong in-house candidate. I'm not sure why there's so much, I guess, disdain among people for Brandon Staley.
Well, because he's connected to Nick Sorensen's performance as the defensive coordinator because they're like,
right.
Oh, it's a Staley Sorensen. And
but Sorensen, but Staley wasn't running the defensive staff, and he also wasn't calling the plays. And
I think he was in charge of the defensive backs, and if that's the case, that was one of our strongest areas of defense was our secondary.
Yeah, he was a pass game defensive coordinator, right? So, and if you actually look at how the metrics of our pass defense from our, as you said, from the defensive backs perspective, it was actually phenomenal. It was way better than it should have been, especially considering the pass rush rate that we had. And so. Like when you look at what Staley did with the Rams, there's a reason he got the Chargers head coaching job. His defense with the Chargers was always still pretty decent. Like it was pretty good. I didn't see a lot of systemic issues with the Chargers defense. Again, when you look at coaches that have given Kyle Shanahan fits over the years, I remember back to that Chargers game where it was only because DeMeco Ryans' defense played unreal in 2022 that we even beat the Chargers. It was like 13-6 or 13-9, something like that. It was a really low scoring game. And the Chargers were a good offense that year. That he gave Kyle Shanahan and company a lot of fits. So I think if I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, bring Salah home. Like, it's like the meme from Austin Powers, of
Yeah.
come to me.
I mean, we'll
like,
see.
come home.
The fear is that we're waiting around for Robert Saleh, and then all of a sudden, guys might start getting jobs, and then all of a sudden they announce he's the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, something like, oh. But you never know. I think he'll definitely come back because, I mean, he interviewed for Jacksonville. I think he interviewed for the Raiders.
Yes,
I don't even know if he interviewed for the Bears. And so,
no, it wasn't for the Bears, but somebody else is, I think, in the lead there in Las Vegas, especially with Tom Brady having some opinions there. I just don't see it being.
But the problem too is that Ben Johnson is probably at the top of all their lists, right? And so you're going to get a chance to interview him while he's in the playoffs, but you can't hire him or make an announcement until after the season's over. So is that going to inevitably delay their decision? I would imagine they would tell Saleh on the side, like, hey, we're going to go with a different candidate. And then he can go make his choice and come back to San Francisco. But I don't know. I mean, if I'm him, do I really want to take on another head coaching job at another location? Obviously, you would make more money. But like I said, if I'm the Niners, I'm like, dude, I will pay you as a fucking head coach. I don't care. I just want to get you in here, and I want to get the ball rolling because the draft is coming up, and we need to get everything in line.
Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't even really have to pay him as a head coach because there's going to be offsets from the Jets.
Right.
The Jets,
but
the
still,
Jets are still paying him as a head coach, so
the
he's going to get paid as
Bowl-
a head coach.
Johnny, the Super Bowl is in Santa Clara this next season. They're
I
gonna
know.
go all in. There's no way they're going to be like, well, let's penny pinch a little bit and save some money.
No. I mean, I guess my point is you can pay Saleh $4 million a year, and he would not make one penny more. Like then he would already be making in 2025 because of the offsets. Like whatever San Francisco pays him is only means that's that much less than Woody Johnson has to pay him. So you would have to pay him more than what he was getting paid as the New York Jets head coach for him to actually make more money. That's what I mean.
But still, like this narrative that, this is the last year for Kyle and John. They got to figure it out. Dude, the Super Bowl is in Santa Clara. Either way, they're going to make money. If their team is in the Super Bowl, they're going to make a ton of money. So it's like, hey, look, let's go all in. And again, that's another reason why post June 1st cut Javon Hargrave. They're like, let's free up that cash because we need to go elsewhere. I think the guy that they're going to go after this offseason, DJ Jones. I think that's the guy they want to bring back.
Too. Yeah.
I think they're going to be on the phone with him immediately. I don't think they want to pay him a ton of money, but they want to give him a fair amount just to come back here and be that run stopping guy that they didn't have last season at all. Because like we were just talking about, they got Javon Hargrave, and they're like, "Oh yeah, he's gonna kick ass with Nick Bosa." And all defenses did was they were like, "Well, just run at Hargrave because he sucks against the run," and they just ran right through him. And then they just wore him down throughout the game. It was
him
not
and
good.
Malik Collins. Him and Malik Collins were like mirrors of each other, and neither one were good against the run. I think, the biggest mistake, if I was to say Kyle and John have made their biggest mistake would be it was the DeForest Buckner situation.
Because they fumbled
just because of how much they've tried to invest and they haven't been able to actually replace
Kinlaw.
that. They invested a high first round pick in trying to address DeForest Buckner's absence, and Kinlaw did not work out. And then because Kinlaw didn't work out, you invested $24 million a year in Javon Hargrave, and Javon Hargrave has now not worked out. So you've wasted both a first round pick and a huge amount of draft capital trying to fix what you let out the door. So that is, if there was one decision that I would criticize the most from them, that would be it. I would not be surprised if this year, like you said, they go after DJ Jones, that he's the number one priority come off season. And then they also turn around and invest their first round pick in defensive tackle as well.
I would not be surprised if in the draft that with the number 11 pick, if there is one there, they will draft a defensive end, a pass rusher. I have no doubt in my mind.
There are a couple really sexy pass rushers.
If there's a sexy one there, they cannot resist. They'll be like, just get him. And then because they needed help at defensive end anyway. It was just Leonard Floyd and Bosa. And then who else did you have? Okiana, whatever. What's his name?
Okie doke.
Okie doke.
Okianonu.
Okiyama, Yokohama. He was
I
there.
always just say Sam O. Sam O.
Like
That's what
he
I
was
say.
there, but then they put him at defensive tackle all the time. And then you had Gross Matos, who actually played pretty well towards the end of the year, but he was
He
hurt
did.
almost the whole year and was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
come on, dude." And then you got Robert Beal, who I don't even know why he's still there. He's just like, "Yo, I'm a physical specimen." Like that's great, but you can't perform on the field because when you get out there, you don't do anything. So they need help at defensive end. They need help at defensive tackle. I don't know if Jordan Elliott's still with us this next season. I think he is. But I think getting DJ Jones would be absolutely huge for that interior. Because for me, the biggest areas of concern are the offensive line and defensive line. I think you're good in secondary. You're good at linebacker. You're good. Well, for the most part, you're good at receiving. Yeah, you need some depth at tight end, but the offensive line and defensive lines are what killed them this year.
Yeah, got to build the trenches. I mean, I think most of us would be pretty happy if they pick like all linemen and then like a corner in the 4th round. Like we would be good with that entire draft. So
we're gonna have a ton of time to talk through this. I know Johnny's got to get out of here. Dre will be with us more, guys. I want to give a special shout out. Make sure you follow Dre. He mentioned all the spots that you can follow him. Be sure to take your phone and go up to people in Niner gear, show them this channel, show them some of Johnny's videos, and be sure that you are definitely hit the notification bell during the off season. We go at different times, different things that happen. I couldn't even make last episode because it was at a different time, because Johnny wanted to talk through what had just happened, with firing guys and all this. So again, if you hit the notification bell, that will go a long way for this off season. Couple other things as well. Be sure to catch more of NFL playoff talk on today's episode of Sports Idiot Nation that just came out this morning as well. And then a new podcast that I want to tell you about that just released. And we may have both of you fellers on as a guest because it's all things music. And this podcast is called How It's Related. And it is with my first cousin, Mike, who lives in Fort Wayne, Indiana, with where I live. And we talk all things music. We grew up together and we love talking through music. So that one is called How It's Related. Find it wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple and Spotify. And then, of course, on YouTube, just like everything here. So that's what we got going on. Again, hit the notification bell because we're going to go at all different times. Thanks to Dre for hanging out. I know Johnny's got to get to his interview for offensive coordinator. He'll let us know how that
breaking
went.
news.
Yeah, he said it's in a different town. He didn't say it was in Santa Clara. We're just assuming that it is. That's not his office behind you.
That's why
that is a paper, like a shot of like paper cardboard.
It's a green screen.
It's a green screen of his.
That's why he's dressed like Sorensen. He's like, I'm gonna take on that look, so I'll blend right in.
Yeah, even that's news to Dawn. She's like, oh, nice.
I know.
Yeah.
Major upgrade.
Yeah. Technic Chick says music is my jam. Check out How It's Related. Definitely. New episodes drop every Wednesday. Episode 1 was just dropped last week. So, Dre, thanks again for hanging out. We will talk more for sure about these topics. These topics are not going anywhere, and neither are we. But in the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, go Niners.